we have a podcast.
Diving deep into all things Texans, both on and off the field. Here's Sean Pendergast and Pro Football Hall of Famer, the General, John McClain. Welcome to Houtopia.
Hey everybody, welcome in. It's the Houtopia Football Podcast. The season just keeps on going, and now we know who the Texans are going to be playing in the next round of the playoffs. There are 8 teams left standing. The Houston Texans are one of them. Life is good. Welcome in, everybody. I'm Sean Pendergast, one half of Payne and Pendergast, Sports Radio 610, 6 a.m. to 10 a.m. each day, Monday through Friday, joined as always by my good friend, the Hall of Famer, and our senior columnist at sportsradio610.com, John McClain. John, happy divisional round week to you. And I know you're busy. You got Hall of Fame stuff going on this week. So this is between playoffs, the Texans actually being in the playoffs, and Hall of Fame. This is a busy season for you right now.
Such a fun week, them getting ready to go back to Baltimore where it was 7-6, at halftime in that first game, and the Ravens pulled away in the third quarter. I believe the Texans, depending on Robert Woods, I guess he'll start. So I think that means they'll have 6 different starters in that game than they had in the first game. And, Todd Monken was in his first game as Ravens offensive coordinator. And then, of course, the Texans, everything was new. And I expect, it's going to be a much better game. It's going to be cold, but doesn't look like there's going to be any snow or rain. So everybody is fired up to see what the Texans can do next.
Yeah, well, and we got this cold weather here this week, John. It's almost like, the Texans, between C.J. Stroud and DeMeco Ryans, 2 very God-fearing men, it feels like God has smiled upon them by giving us 30-degree weather here for them to prepare for 25-degree weather in Baltimore this week. DeMeco said yesterday, we're going to be practicing outside. Get us ready for the cold weather. Thank you, Lord. I added in the thank you, Lord, but I'm sure in his mind DeMeco is saying that.
The temperature is supposed to be somewhere around 27 or 28 and partly cloudy, which means it could be cloudy or it could be sunny. The key is the stadium's right on the harbor, and sometimes in the winter you get more wind than you do when the weather's good. And of course, if you get more wind, you're going to have to run the ball more. But right now, if the Texans lose, it's like this last game. Had they lost to Cleveland, still would have been a great season. People would have been pumped about next year. But now that they've won, people want to see if they can get past the divisional round for the first time in team history.
Did you you've seen the spread, I'm sure, John. The Texans are 9.5-point underdogs. Does that sound right to you, 9.5, or does that feel a little high to you?
I thought it would be, I think you tweeted 7.5, something, a touchdown.
Yeah.
And because the Texans are a much better team now, the coldest they've played in this year is 48 degrees at Tennessee. They beat the Titans on that Kaimi Fairbairn 54-yard field goal with no time left. Even in the Jets game where they were awful, it was 58 degrees. Mm-hmm. So they'll be playing in cold weather for the first time. But Stroud's been so good and the defense is playing better. I think they'll play a lot better. And if they win, it won't surprise me. But if they lose, it certainly won't surprise me either. But I'm guessing there's going to be a lot of money bet on the Texans.
Yeah, well, the line's already gone down to 9, at least where I look for stuff like this, and I jumped on it at 9. So I'm in on the Texans getting more than a touchdown in this game. Obviously, most of that's based on the faith in C.J. Stroud that he can keep this game close. It's interesting, John, this cold weather theme here. I'm very anxious to see how they play, particularly C.J. in the cold weather, and I know he's played in cold weather before in college. But just in general with the AFC long term, unless the Texans are going to go get the 1 or 2 seed every year, which they could be perfectly capable of doing when they continue to fortify this roster and so forth, the Texans are really the only warm weather indoor team that's at that level right now in the AFC. I know Miami's a warm weather team that made the playoffs. They're kind of fraudulent right now, and I don't think they know what they want to do at quarterback. The main teams in the AFC right now are Baltimore, Cincinnati when Joe Burrow is healthy, Buffalo, Kansas City. Those are probably the 4 quarterbacks plus CJ. Those are like the 5 best quarterbacks in the AFC right now. The AFC is in all likelihood for the next several years going to go through cold weather cities. So this is kind of I think a nice early test just to see if the weather's a factor at all for this team.
I agree, and it shows that you can't be losing games with no time left against Atlanta and Carolina.
Yes. Yeah, they all count. No question about that, John. I thought too, just circling back to Cleveland, because you and I, we've only done one podcast since the game ended, in thinking it through and really getting to see how the last 48 hours, 72 hours, whatever it is, have played out since Saturday. Them getting a home game obviously helped them win the game being at home. I thought it was really cool though for the team to kind of get the message from the fan base on the way into the offseason that no, we're back now. Like we're back. We believe in you guys. We're loud again. Maybe that's just because it was the playoffs. Who knows? I can't imagine this feeling wearing off going into next season. If anything, the enthusiasm's only going to be amped up going into next season because there's going to be more moves to be made, that are going to get people even more excited about this team and the potential of this team. I thought it was really cool, as opposed to the last impression being at home, being the New Year's Eve game with Tennessee, which was fine. It was good, but it was more of a normal home game, late arriving crowd, so forth. I thought for the team to kind of see like, no, this is how we feel about you guys now. And the game was sold out. I thought there were way fewer Browns fans than I thought there would be. I think that was kind of a real cool opportunity. Thank you to the Tennessee Titans, John, for allowing the team to absorb that adulation from the crowd, as opposed to just seeing it on social media and hearing about it while going on the road to play a wild card game.
I'll believe it when I see it because we have late arriving crowds. We have a lot of empty seats at games. The Astros, they don't fill up right when at games. Something about fans here, they don't like to be in their seats. Not a lot of them don't like to be in their seats for the first pitch or the kickoff, which I just don't understand. Now I get there 3 hours early, but I'm different. But I just can't imagine paying your hard-earned money and not being there for the whole game. And all the fans that came to this game, they got their money's worth. Hopefully that is a sign of what's to come next season when we're going to see them a lot more in prime time than we have, which was once. And I'm glad the ESPN, ABC think enough of them to put Troy Aikman and Joe Buck back on their broadcast for a second time. So everything is definitely looking up.
All right, John, you ready for a little news and notes here? General news and notes. You got some good stuff for the people?
Yeah, let me clear my throat there.
Yeah, I was gonna say, all right?
Some of the things are about CJ and the team. We all know that he's now the youngest player to ever win a playoff game. He's 22 years, 102 days. The previous youngest was Michael Vick. I thought it was interesting that CJ grew up in California, and he said young Vick was his favorite quarterback when he was growing up. There was a lot of quarterbacks to pick from, but I thought that was interesting.
That's why he wears 7, John. That's why he wears number 7.
Yeah.
Michael Vick.
I think it's weird because CJ's nothing like Vick. He doesn't run. Vick's the best running quarterback I've ever seen. He said one time, I was a running back who had the best arm, so they gave me the football and told me to play quarterback when he was young. And it worked out quite well on the field. And I thought it was also interesting that he and D'Amico Ryan's first rookie coach quarterback combo to win a playoff game since 2009 when Rex Ryan and the butt fumbler, Mark Sanchez, did it. And that outburst was the most points in Texans playoff history, which wasn't surprising. And it's the first time a team's had multiple pick sixes in a playoff game since Seattle did it in 2008. And another thing, Sean, it was really impressive about the outburst. I keep hearing people on TV saying, boy, Texans scored all these points against the Browns defense. Well, 14 were scored against the offense.
Right. Still 31,
but still, it is the most points, and this is kind of weird. It's the most points a number one defense is allowed in playoff history. But that's kind of weird because they didn't allow the 2 touchdowns. And it was strange, Sean, when that 157.2 rating, which is the most by a rookie in NFL history, was tied a day later by Jordan Love in their upset of the Cowboys. 2 young quarterbacks, 157.2.
John, did you see Jordan Love's overall stats in the game? Like not just
like Stroud's.
They were identical. They were 2 yards apart. Other than that, they were identical. They were both 16 of 21. Stroud threw for 274, and Love, one of them threw for 274, the other 272 or 262, whatever it was. They were 2 yards apart. And then they both threw 3 touchdowns. Neither one threw a pick, and they both had a 157.2 rating, which I thought was interesting because when I've watched Jordan Love this year in the second half of the season, the Packers have been on TV more, I think, the second half of the season. At least I've watched them more. And Jordan Love, his game, he's got a little bit of CJ. I think CJ's a little more polished as a passer, but they've got similar physiques. They got a similar throwing motion. They even look similar facially to some degree. And I've thought that about Jordan Love since watching him. And then for the two of them to put up identical stat lines and blow out upset wins in the same weekend, I thought was really, really cool. And I think even if you go look at the play that really was like CJ's kind of signature in that, in the win over Cleveland was the pass to Dalton Schultz right before the half, where he rolls out to the right, throws it back to the left, absolute dime. The play that kind of put the Cowboys away was almost the same play, just run in reverse, where Jordan Love's rolling to the left, throws it back over to Musgrave to the right, who's way more open than Dalton Schultz was. I mean, Musgrave actually had to come back to the ball, turns around, runs into the end zone. It's really incredible how similar they both are. Now they're both quarterbacking the lowest seeded team in each of their conferences. And I think similarly, and they run in the same offense, with LaFleur and with Slowick. And I think they both probably, Stroud and Love, had the same sort of narrative following them this weekend, which is, these guys are the lowest seeded team, but you don't want to play them because their quarterbacks are hot right now. Jordan Love and CJ Stroud are both playing really, really good football right now.
Love kind of came out of nowhere because it was the last 9 games. I think he's been really good as far as touchdown interception differential. But as far as being great, it's only happened recently where Stroud has been building up to it. Stroud's gotten a lot more positive publicity.
Oh, yeah,
for Love sure. Has. And I tell you something that I found strange, 236 yards passing in the first half by Stroud before they called off the dogs. That is the most yards passing in the first half of a playoff game since 1970. Wow. That really surprised me. And 2 more about other players. Laramie Tunsil, we all know, did a great job against Myles Garrett. Myles Garrett's been getting ripped in Northeast Ohio. He had no sacks, and according to Next Generation's stats, he had only 1 pressure. He had no hits, no knockdowns. Tunsil did a number on him, and that's one reason Laramie keeps getting the only awards anybody on this team gets. And the other one is Derek Stingley Jr. They were keeping him on his side, but they had him running with Amari Cooper. And he covered Cooper on 35 of 42 snaps, and that's 83.3%. And he caught 1 pass for -6 yards out of being targeted 3 times. So Derek Stingley Jr. and Laramie Tunsil deserve special recognition for outstanding performances. And now I can't wait to see what they do with Stingley. Do they keep him on one side? Do they say cover Odell Beckham Jr., Zay Flowers? How is D'Amico Ryans going to do it with strong input from Matt Burke?
Yeah, if I had to guess, he goes back to what he's been doing, John, because Cooper was so specific to have to shut down. I mean, you had a body of work from 3 weeks before that, so that's the head of the snake right there. I don't know if one exists with Baltimore. It feels like there's way more capable weapons or threatening weapons on Baltimore's roster than there are on Cleveland's roster right now. But yeah, that'll be interesting to see how D'Amico handles that. Yeah, the 2 big one-on-one star versus star matchups in that game, the Texans won going away. Laramie Tunsil dominated Myles Garrett when he was blocking him. And Derek Stingley Jr. over the last month and a half, might be the best cornerback in all of football. He's played that well.
Well, he's voted AFC Defensive Player of the Month last week.
Yeah.
One more thing that I looked up because I've been thinking about this, but especially after the wild card victory in which Christian Harris played great. Blake Cashman's been the most consistent linebacker. But It reminds me of Fred Warner and Dre Greenlaw of the 49ers. Neither one was a high pick, and yet when D'Amico was coaching linebackers and he was coaching the defense, they developed developed into two of the best in the NFL. And now Cashman's issue has always been health, but he's been healthy for the most part this season. And then Christian Harris, who really struggled early, especially with coverage, has come on. So can't wait to see next season if those two guys take that next step like Warner and Greenlaw have.
Yeah, we'll see. Okay, they got to bring Cashman back, John. They got to sign him. He's a free agent after this year.
They got a lot of guys. Nick Caserio's going to be really busy signing players because so many of them are on one-year deals or their contracts expired.
Yeah, that cap space is not going to go as far as people think in terms of bringing in reinforcements from the outside because so many of these guys have outplayed their contracts. Either they're not coming back and you find the next group of guys to outplay their contracts, or you feel good about the direction that this group is going and you bring the lion's share of them back at a higher price. The good news is CJ's contract is still such for the next 2 years that you've got a lot of flexibility, like it's for 2 years. And then he's going to be making $75 million a year in 2027 or whatever it is.
And it'll be worth it. And his agent, David Mulugeta, will say, okay, now that we've agreed to the terms, I want a no trade clause. And they'll say, bleep you.
You think? Do you think they'll say no to a no trade clause, John?
After what happened with Watson, I damn sure do.
Okay. Well, I sure hope that's not a point of contention, John. I don't want to.
Well, they can franchise him for 3 years and keep him around that way.
Well, let's not talk about this. Let's just talk about CJ making $6 million this year or whatever the hell it is. Oh, all right. General news and notes, John. We appreciate that as always. I got a bunch of mailbag questions, John, that we're gonna plow through here. If you're ready to go,
I'm always ready.
I knew that. All right. So HOU mailbag at gmail.com. HOU mailbag at gmail.com. Let's start with our guy Chris in the ATL. The situation Caserio was brought into with Easterby and the McNairs, the Watson saga, the coaching carousel, all of that while just trying to build a roster. He's done a tremendous job in my eyes, and I admit I thought he was the wrong hire to begin with. So the question after my setup narrative is Nick Caserio the best GM the Texans have ever had?
Well, let me think. They had Charlie Casserly to start off, then Rick Smith, and Rick did a great job of drafting players in the first round. He won first 2 division titles, 2 playoff games. Nick Caserio's been here 3 years. He's won 1 playoff game, but he was in charge of the rebuild. But I'm not going to say that because when Rick Smith was hired, they were coming off a 2-14 team, and then Rick had longevity, depending. And so right now, this team hasn't been any farther than Rick Smith's teams. Now, of course, it's really hard to take Nick over Bill O'Brien, but right now I'd say it's still Rick Smith, but Nick Caserio is coming hard.
Well, John, I think Nick's probably 2 wins away from being able to say, yeah, he is. I mean, if they get to the AFC title game, then, it's checkmate. I mean, there's plenty of Rick Smith architected teams that got knocked out in the 3 to be exact. They got knocked out by the divisional round. Derwin in Cyprus, loyal podcast listener, says, how important is it the Texans get to keep the same schedule over the last 3 weeks, meaning Saturday, and now Saturday again, same sleep patterns, days off, et cetera, John? How big is that, do you think, for them that this is the 3rd straight week where today, you and I are recording this on a Tuesday, 3rd straight week where Tuesday is the first day of getting ready for the next game?
You want the extra day to prepare, but I think when you get in the playoffs, it doesn't matter if you played on a Monday and you're playing the following Sunday. I don't think it matters. The players are so jacked up and excited, and so are the coaches. But if you do have the extra day, of course, it might help. If it helps one injured player play the extra day of rest, then that is exactly what you want over the other teams that don't have that regular schedule.
Yeah, I think they're kind of lucky, John. It doesn't sound like, other than Noah Brown, who went on injured reserve, who it felt like was just 1 tackle away from going on injured reserve. Like, he was so banged up. I give him credit for just getting out onto the field in that game on Saturday. But 1 pass to him, he lands on his shoulder, and now his shoulder's hurt to go along with his hand, his back, whatever. He had 2 or 3 other injuries. Like, he was awfully banged up. It feels like they came out of that game, the Cleveland game, a pretty healthy team. I know Tunsil went into the tent at one point during the game, but he came back out and played. And to your point earlier, in news and notes, played well when he was back in there. Unlike some of these other games recently where it feels like they lose 5 guys at some point during the game, it seems like they came out relatively healthy in this game.
It looked like Tunsil was twisting his kneecap when he was on one knee.
Yeah.
Hurt after somebody ran into him. I think Juice Scruggs fell on him. And the way he was messing with it, I thought, well, he's done for the year. And then he came back and continued to shut down Myles Garrett.
Yep, did a good job. All right, John, Wale in Virginia. What is the likelihood of keeping Derrick Henry in the division by bringing him to the Texans? He's got that one cut fitting for the zone running Coop Shanastani offense. John, would you kick tires on a maybe an inexpensive, oft-used Derrick Henry this offseason if you were the Texans?
Well, he showed in that one game that he ran the 4th fastest on the field when he got in the open field. And there was a story on him. This is why I haven't given up on Dameon Pierce. I was in the Athletic before their last game in which he said, I wish I'd been able to learn the zone scheme quicker and better. And I saw it, man, exactly what Dameon Pierce is struggling with. So kick tires, maybe. There's no guarantees not going up there. If the new coach wants him back at a reasonable price, maybe they'll bring him back. But he's not. I don't think he's over the hill. I mean, Raheem Mostert's 32, and he scored 19 touchdowns, something like that for Miami. Key is you just don't want him carrying the ball 25 times a game. So I would at least check it. Of course I would, especially if Devin Singletary leaves.
Yeah. John, I mean, it's been a long time since we could say this, but I think there's going to be a lot of guys that want to come play for the Texans, especially on the offensive side of the ball.
I agree with you, but still, you have to pay them. That sounds great.
Yeah.
They're not going to take a discount to come here.
Of course not. No, and I'm not saying that. I don't think Henry's going to be expensive. I think teams are going to be awfully scared by the amount of tread, not amount of wear on the tread with him. I mean, multiple seasons where he's touching the ball 350 times. And it looks like at times this year it had caught up to him. So, but that would be fun for sure, Wale. All right, next one, John, from Lorenzo. I've had a question that's been burning in my mind for this whole season, and I know there's a lot of variables to this, but do either of you think that Bryce Young would have had a better season had he been picked at 2 by the Texans than what he's had in Carolina? I still prefer CJ 100%, but I can't help to think what could have been with him. It's hard to be worse than Bryce Young was in Carolina. Let's just put it that way. Like, he definitely would have been better here than he would have in that cesspool in Carolina.
And CJ would not have been as good as if he had played at Carolina because he didn't have receivers. He doesn't have an offensive line. Their defense was pretty good, but I think if the roles were reversed, one would have been better and the other one would have been worse. But, and of course, Panthers will say they're really happy with Bryce Young. But, every time CJ has a good game or gets on the highlights with a great throw, David Tepper has regrets because there was a lot of talk over there that he's the one that wanted Bryce Young.
It's funny, John. I actually went back last night while the Tampa Bay and Philadelphia game was on, and it was kind of really going through one of its boring phases. I had my laptop out with my AirPods in, so I was on YouTube, and I watched some of the Bryce Young Carolina coverage right after he was drafted, like the press conference after he was drafted, the press conference that Reich and Fitterer did the night of the draft, when they met with the media. And it's a really wild thing to go back and watch now, considering Reich lasted 11 weeks and Fitterer's fired also. And I watched the war room shots of Bryce Young getting drafted, David Tepper calling him on the phone, Tepper and Fitterer hugging, the whole room going nuts about Bryce Young. It's a crazy thing to go back and watch now that you know that the thing ended in complete smoldering disaster in Carolina. It's a fascinating watch. I recommend it to anybody, John. If you want to feel good about the Texans by participating in Schadenfreude for the team that picked in front of them, go watch any of the Bryce Young coverage in Carolina from back during draft weekend. It's amazing.
What they should be the happiest about with the Panthers is he played all but one game. And there was all that worry that because he was so frail that he was going to get hurt, but he played one more game than CJ Stroud did.
He did behind a bad offensive line too. Absolutely. All right, Mark is in Austin, John. He said, I've been a loyal, some might say rabid Texans fan since the early 2000s when the McNairs were awarded the franchise. And I can't remember a time since 2011 that I've been this electrified about a team. So, Sean and John, the big question presented in your format, for real or fugazi, the Houston Texans will win a Super Bowl this year.
Fugazi. They're not ready to win a Super Bowl. Wouldn't it be great if they played the 49ers in the Super Bowl in Vegas?
Be phenomenal. Yeah.
D'Amico and Slowick and all the storylines with that game, all the former Texans coaches in Santa Clara with Kyle Shanahan. It would just be, boy, like homecoming for all the people in the organizations. And but I'll tell you this, I said this when Deshaun Watson was at his peak. I thought they'd win Super Bowls with Watson. And I think based on what I've seen of Stroud, because it's all about the quarterback in the NFL. And then you got to be an astute GM to fill in around him. I think the Texans will win their first Super Bowl with C.J. Stroud. And if they win Sunday, if they were to upset Baltimore, and I'm writing a column about this today, it'd be the first time Houston's had a team in the AFC championship game since the 79 Oilers.
Yeah, no, John, absolutely. Absolutely. Well, I think unlike Deshaun, CJ has a better head coach, I think, and a real general manager putting things together. You know what I mean? Like Deshaun was.
Well, you didn't think Easterby was any good when he was assistant interim GM?
No, I went back.
You got Josh McCown.
I went back through his moves, John, and I just, you're right. I wanted to give it a chance, and I went back through his moves, and it turns out he sucked.
You want to give it a fat chance.
God. All right. Charles emails into the mailbag. Outside of his contract, do you think Watson regrets being on the opposite side of the Texans? What do you think was going through Deshaun's head while that game was going on Saturday, John?
People want to say he's happy that Flacco looked bad. Well, Flacco wasn't coming back under any circumstances. And he's probably thinking, man, I remember when it was like that in 2019 and we beat Buffalo and everybody was so fired up, but I still got $230 million guaranteed.
That's kind of what Charles is saying. Yeah, like outside of he's got his money for sure. Although I do wonder, like, okay, like congrats, you were making 39, now you're making 46. You weren't not going to get your money from the previous contract. Like, what's the number where it's okay for you to kind of have lost your professional dignity somewhere along the way? You know what I mean? Like, that's kind of what it is. Like, if you just stuck around and kind of let the thing fix itself, I don't know. I just know I'm glad it's played out the way it has, John, for sure.
Oh, yeah.
Charles also asked, where would you rank the playoff victory on Saturday compared to the other playoff games? I know you like questions like this, John. Texans won 4 other playoff games before this one. Where would you stack rank this? I think the only one we can have a conversation about with this one is the very first one with the J.J. Watt pick 6.
I think this would be number 2 to that one because it was the first in history, and the Watt phenomenon was born. We didn't think anything special about J.J. up to that point, and it was fans were so hungry because it was the first division title. Anytime it's the first, it's big, but boy, this one was right up there. But Cincinnati was favored, just like who they just beat. My mind's gone. Cleveland was favored. So I think the first one, and if they win this one to go to the AFC Championship game, or whenever they do go to the AFC Championship game, that will become the biggest in team history.
Yeah, we'll talk more about this game coming up on Saturday in our Thursday episode, because I want to go through that with you, like where we feel. We won't do it now. We'll do it in that episode. It probably fits a little better. But, like, where do we feel like this particular Texans team, how well-equipped are they to pull off the upset compared to the previous, the 4 predecessors that have been this far? We can talk about that more later this week. So just a tease, I guess, for the audience out there, John, because I know a lot of people are wondering, what exactly are their chances? This 9.5-point spread is right in line with where it's been going into this round for all of those other Texans teams, other than the Brock Osweiler one, where it was a 16-point spread going up to New England. All the other ones have been between 8 and 10 somewhere. So the Texans are right in that, at least spread-wise, in that meaty part of the curve. But this team feels a little different than some of those. We'll talk about that on Thursday. A few more here, John, in the mailbag. John Burnett says, Brevin, Jordan, and John Mechie both had their best games this year in the previous game. Can we start to expect more out of these two And I'm assuming he means for the Ravens game coming up on Saturday.
Yeah. Well, Brevin had one catch, and it was a great run. Wasn't a great catch, wasn't a great throw. It was a great run. Xavier Hutchinson had a great block to clear him on the sideline. He made a great cut, and then he just outran everybody.
Mm-hmm.
You know, he's not a tight end. He's more like a big receiver or an H-back, and he was tremendous. And I think that would have been his 4th touchdown catch this year.
Mm-hmm.
Now, Mechie, that was his best game. You know, we've talked about that he has not produced the way he should, and that gave us just a glimpse of what to expect from John Mechie III next season when he's finished overcoming his torn ACL and his battle with leukemia. That's why Nick Caserio traded into the 2nd round to get him.
Well, they're going to need him. No Noah Brown. John Mechie and Xavier Hutchinson are going to get those snaps now. So
yeah, Robert Woods will be gone. That's why I think wide receiver will still be a priority in like the 2nd or 3rd round. It'll be Tank, and then it'll be Collins, and then a new receiver.
Yep. Mario. Well, I'm going to save Mario. Mario is asking a question about how we think things are going to play out against the Ravens. Let's save that for Thursday this week. Sorry, Mario. Ryan from the Shug, John. Ryan from the Shug is back. The Shug being Sugarland, I assume. Listen to Payne and Pendergast this morning. Sean, you said, quote, the stadium was the loudest I can remember since 2011. Yes, I said that about Saturday's game. What other seasons were like this, excluding 2019 because it's recent memory, and how do they compare? So this is such an exciting season and feels like it restores some respect to the franchise. Can you compare this season to any other season you've covered this team?
Only 2011, not 12, because they had home field advantage. All they had to do is win one game. They blew it, and they went in to the playoffs. And even though they beat Cincinnati, nobody thought anything special about the team. The 11 team was special because of Yates and because it was the first. And 19 was, you know, when they beat Buffalo here, and then they go to Kansas City and have that 24-0 lead. Okay, they choked it. But then when O'Brien traded Hopkins, the negativity toward the organization just was so enhanced that nobody was happy with anything that happened after that because of all the negativity off the field. And so this one, and I've been telling people this, I have several former Oilers have been texting me about the Texans, asking me questions like, they don't say they haven't kept up, but they're interested in knowing things about them. And I think that's a good sign. And one of them said, I see signs of this team, things happening to this team and the way people feel about them in the community, the way they did when we were the Love You Blue Oilers, which I thought was very interesting.
Very interesting. I wasn't here for that, John. You were, but I know how beloved those Oilers teams were through stories from you and others at that time. Do you think that we can, much to Amy Adams Strunk's chagrin, do you think we can steal all those old Oilers and now they are aligned with Houston Texans exclusively and want nothing to do with the zombie Oilers up in Nashville? What do you think can we pull that off, John?
I don't think I think you're not going to pull it off with a lot of them because she has reunions up there every year and treats them like.
Well, they wouldn't be allowed to go, John. They can't go to the reunion.
If you can't let them go, the one that's the most best possibility is Bruce Matthews. Mm-hmm. Bruce was sitting right in front of Janice McNary and his wife Carrie, because I went in to see Janice and talked to her before the game. They shot a picture of us, and I tweeted it while I was talking to her. And it's like I tweeted during the game when it was third quarter and they had a big lead. I bet Buffalo's run through Bruce's mind a time or two. Yeah. And but Bruce, who has said in an interview I did with him before he was inducted into the Gridiron Legends, that he said he thinks Columbia Blue should be in Houston and not Nashville. And that's not a popular thing with the Titans organization.
Good. I'm glad he
when the team was moving, Bruce was the most outspoken player about not wanting to go. Yeah. And he also, I remember one time I did an interview with him. He said, if Buzz that desperate, I'll give him a couple of grand to help him out.
Like Bruce rubbing a couple quarters together. Here you go, bud. Here.
One time at the start of the 93 seasons when the salary cap was being implemented, nobody knew what it was. The GM Floyd Reese was new. He didn't have a clue. But they were a talented team coming off 3 consecutive playoff appearances. And Bud came to spring training in San Angelo, or this case, San Antonio, for his annual State of the Oilers address. And he stood in front of the players and he told them, you better win this year because something called a salary cap's coming and you guys make too much money. We're not going to be able to keep you together. And players started throwing $1 bills at him like he's a dancer.
Like a stripper. I love it. Like a hooer. All right. Last one, John. This is from our guy, Joe Q, who I may say so, Joe Q. I don't know what you do for an actual job for employment, but if you ever want job as either like a research analyst or some sort of producer for this podcast and the radio show, John, look at all this research this guy did.
That's impressive
right here. He's got a
Very
chart and
impressive.
everything. All for this question, John. And the question's for you. He said, there's a question for John. Can you recall a time ever in the past when an NFL head coach had two former teammates on his roster? DeMeco Ryans played with John Weeks and Kareem Jackson. He says, I don't know the answer, but it seems highly improbable. And he goes on to list all the things that would have to be true in order for that to happen. You know, like how few coaches are actually former players to begin with, you know, to even have teammates, to how young the coach would have to be in order for to have teammates that are still playing and so forth. Can you ever recall, John, a player or a coach, I should say, having multiple former teammates on his roster?
No, but I haven't thought about it. Coaches are getting younger now. A guy like Sean McVay, if he played in the NFL, he's going to run into a lot of players he used to play with because he's like 30 when he got the job, but he didn't. And so you look around at some that are in their 30s, but if it's not unprecedented, it is extremely rare. And John Weeks actually played with him for 2 years. Kareem, 2 or 3 years. 2 years. Yep. And they were there for the last game of DeMeco's career, a playoff loss at Baltimore.
In Baltimore, yeah, absolutely. Hey, John, real quick before we duck out, did you see? I know you saw this. The video, the footage of JJ on the field with DeMeco at the end of JJ's last game that surfaced this past week.
Oh yeah,
where he told DeMeco, "Go make Houston great again." This was before the job. This is before Lovey had even been fired. You know, like Lovey was still. It was the day Lovey got fired, like 10 hours later. But that was that day. Do you think there was just a major assumption that DeMeco was going to be the head coach of this football team at that point in the process?
I think JJ was just guessing because they interviewed a lot of really good candidates.
Yeah.
Pete Johnson, Shane Steichen, Evero, the defensive coordinator at the time of the Broncos. But that's like I told him before the preseason game here, there was an Amazon game. I went over and told him I want to be the first one, congratulate him on being a head coach. And he thought I was crazy, but I knew that after he came back for one more year, he was going to be a head coach. And I just said here, but I didn't think there was any way Lovie Smith was going to he's going to put Pep Hamilton in charge of the offense, and it's going to be the worst ever. And so I had no idea Lovey be fired. I thought he'd make 2 or 3 seasons and DeMeco would be somewhere like Denver.
Thank God they fired him and hired DeMeco.
Oh my God, goodness. Don't you know in Denver, they don't, I'll say the media doesn't like Sean Payton. He's always been really hard to deal with. But when they see how popular DeMeco is here, and he would be popular in other cities, but not as popular here because he was so beloved and respected as a player.
Two cities, John, if I were in Denver and I was watching DeMeco Ryans coach the Texans with Sean Payton in Denver, and it may still turn out fine. If they win a Super Bowl, then everybody, who cares how big an asshole Sean Payton is. But for now, if I was in Denver watching DeMeco or Carolina watching CJ Stroud, I would quit watching football. I would I'd start watching tennis or something. I'd take up some other sport or cocaine. Or something like meth. I don't like
alcohol will do.
Alcohol, whatever, just something. Yeah, I'd be drinking heavily, especially Carolina. I think Peyton may end up getting it turned around in Denver. I don't know what's going to happen with Bryce Young, and I do know CJ Stroud's going to be around for a while. Well, that would be tough.
The thing about Carolina, I think DeMeco would have been too smart to go there because he would have had multiple offers. They were the first team. All of them wanted him, and he ruled them out immediately. And I'm guessing it's because Tepper's reputation and Jimmy Sexton is his agent, and Jimmy's really good. Probably would have told him you don't want to go there.
Yep. Does Jimmy Sexton? Do we know who represents Bobby Slowick?
Jimmy Sexton.
They have the
think
same agent.
Sexton.
Okay.
I think they're
Gotcha.
all. I think Sexton does all of them now,
Does he?
except Sean Payton.
Okay, so
Yeah, Donald
Sexton is he's the guy for coaches. That Bob
Yes, he
Lamonte is
is.
the guy for front office people,
And
right?
Bob has a lot of coaches but some of them have retired. But yeah,
But
he
Bob's got Casario and
Bob's
Easterby and all
got
those guys.
Casario,
Yeah.
and he's got Jack Easterby.
Yeah, Easterby, who the hottest free agent out there in front
Must have
office.
been a favor to Casario.
Yeah. And then and I guess player wise, probably David Mulligetta these days.
Seems like Mulligetta. Lamont has been around forever.
Yeah.
And he doesn't take them on immediately like he used to. You know, at one point, he still got Andy Reid. He had Holmgren, all those Packer coaches that he had Holmgren because Holmgren had been at his high school. And so that Holmgren tree, they all went to Bob Lamont. And he did a great job. And he started picking up the front office guys. But Sexton is the big agent when it comes to the coaches. And he's not like, say, Scott Boras, who's just going to go where the money is. He wants his people to be happy and go to the right spot, like D'Amico coming to the Texans.
All right, John, we got a few more days till we get Ravens Texans. We'll preview that game on Thursday this week in our Thursday episode. What do you got going on the website? I know you got a busy week because you're presenting Andre Johnson again. Is this the week you present Andre for the Hall of Fame?
Yeah, that's Wednesday. I was supposed to go to Atlanta for 2 days, and thank God they canceled it. And we're doing a Zoom like we did in the last few years. And I'm doing that. So I'm not writing Wednesday. I'm writing a column. I have two columns up right now on the Texans, and I'm going to have another one today. And then I'll probably have another one on Thursday and 5 things to watch in the game on Friday, as well as 3 Houtopia football podcasts.
Yes, absolutely. John, do you feel like I would want to be in the same room with my audience because I feel like I would connect with them a little more and try to be persuasive and whatnot. Do you care that it's Zoom versus being in the same like proximity as the people you're talking to?
For my first 27 years, we went to the Super Bowl city, and then it got complicated because the NFL Network and the Honors Show and knocking on doors and telling them they're in. Yeah. So they wanted to do it earlier, which is fine. And going back to the pandemic, we've done it on Zoom, and it doesn't matter to me.
Yeah.
And if they want it in person, I've always stood up and I always use this example because I love the TV show Law and Order. Mm-hmm. And I stand up and act like Sam Waterston does on Law and Order when he's making his closing argument to the jury, looking them in the eye and everything. That's what I've always done. Well, I can't do that on Zoom. I can, but I'm too busy looking down at my quotes and my stats and everything. So hopefully everybody should keep their fingers crossed. I'm afraid it's going to be another log jam that won't be broken with Andre, Reggie Wayne, and Torrey Holt, but I'm giving it everything I got.
John, it sounds like if Andre's not going to get in, then Texan fans actually should be rooting for one or both of Wayne and Holt to get in.
I'd take any of them.
Just it's like having a clog in your sink, right? You know, they're the clog right now.
I even suggested that nobody wants to do this, that in the order in which they've been finalists the most, that would be Holt first, Wayne second, Andre third. If it just break the log jam, that would be fine with me, but we're not going to do that because we don't make deals like that. So Andre's going to be competing against them till we break the log jam. Hopefully it will be this year.
Well, you need some more nefarious people on that committee who are going to make side deals, John. That's my suggestion to you.
I've never had anybody even approach me saying, if you vote for my guy, I'll vote for your guy in 30 years.
That's never happened, huh?
Never.
That's good. I like hearing that, actually.
I like people all the time say, I know how they operate on that committee. Nobody's got a clue unless you've ever been in the room.
Excuse me. I don't know why
I didn't want you to get choked up.
Yeah, I got choked up there over Andre Johnson.
If Andre gets in this year, I'll get choked up. But I'm not. I don't mean to go in being negative. I have changed up my presentation. A lot of people talk positively about him. After I talk, anybody can talk about any client. 2 or 3 others I'll say something about as well. But I sure hope this is the year.
You should just add like a couple like hot chicks standing behind you doing the presentation so people feel a certain kind
Yeah,
of
then
way.
they're not going to listen to me at all.
Couple Hooters girls, but when they think of Andre Johnson, John, they're going to be like, God, I don't know why, but when I hear Andre Johnson's name, it just makes me feel good. I don't know. If it keeps going more years, you may have to start adding some flair to the presentation, a little sizzle, you know.
I'll do it. I'm doing everything I can.
I know you
I
are.
got my game plan ready to go.
Good deal. I can't wait to hear how it turns out. John, I enjoyed it as always. Good luck on the presentations.
Thank you, Sean.
All right, good stuff. Big thanks to James Jackson, our producer, getting the podcast out to you quickly. This is going to be fun. Saturday, Ravens, Texans. We've got a preview episode coming up later this week. Click the subscribe button wherever it is you listen to this podcast. That way you don't have to go find it. It'll find you, and you can listen to it. And this is the time, man. Texans are one of the last 8 teams standing, trying to be one of the last 4 teams standing as a big dog in Baltimore on Saturday. So for James and John, I'm Sean. We're out of time. We will see all of you later this week. Thank you for tuning in to the Houtopia Football Podcast. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please don't forget to give it a thumbs up and subscribe to our channel for more content like this. If you want to see more of our videos, be sure to check out our playlist and let us know what you think in the comments below.
Also, don't forget to follow us on social media to stay up to date on our latest updates. Links are in the description. Thanks again for watching, and we'll see you in the next video.